Hello and welcome back to the TV show here at TVC 22 in your ward. We've been through and we've spoken to all of the councillors once and we're coming full circle. Councillor for Ward 1 happens to be a little bit busy this week, so we've done a little switcheroo and Councillor for Ward 2, Mr. Mario Zanth, is back with us again today. Thank you for coming up the queue a little bit and chatting with us. How you doing?
Good. My pleasure, by the way.
Absolutely, and it's much warmer than the last time we were supposed to speak, wasn't it? It was supposed to be really snowy, and here we are in short sleeves down by the water.
I know, it feels great. Finally.
So we'll take a little walk down actually. So one of the things is our previous conversation we spoke in French. So I think just for the sake of the English viewers, we'll go over some of like your own history and politics locally again, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So could you tell us when you first got into municipal politics?
So it was 2014. I remember just kind of having that discussion with my spouse. I had never been in politics before. And I really thought that, I should get involved. One, because I really wanted to help out, but two, I really wanted to learn what all of this was about. And I think when you start at this level, which is the first level in policy making, I guess, you have a very good sense of how everything works, and you have an administration that is very patient in teaching you as well, right? So. But at the end of the day, it was just try to make sure that we got to assist as many people as we could by making strong policy that reflected what people needed in our communities.
And having started in 2014, this is your second term at the moment.
Correct.
Then.
Yes.
Obviously third term potential coming up next. How have you found the whole second term versus first term? Do you feel like you kind of need those 4 years to figure out what you're doing first, and the second term is where you can really implement things?
Yeah, the first term, you're in a learning curve. First term is always about trying to figure out exactly how the budget cycles work. I mean, you need to go through this multiple times. They only happen once a year before you really get your bearings. And then when it comes time for second term, that's when you've grown and you've realized a lot of things, right? When you first run for a campaign, it's funny because you'll right off the bat just start going, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to do that and I'll be the savior of everybody. I think everybody has that same feeling when they get involved. And you get readjusted pretty quickly because you understand that your ideas have to mesh with a policy that currently exists. And if it doesn't already exist, you have to be able to negotiate your position and make people see your point in order to try to get to a place where it's a win-win-win-win-win for everybody, right? And I say that multiple times because there's a lot of different partners.
Absolutely. Is it ever a win-win-win-win-win for everybody though? How much of your job is dealing with discontent parties?
Not as much as people think.
No?
And I think it's all with your attitude. If you go in there with guns a-blazing, you're not going to get much done. And if you go in there understanding the way to negotiate and also get your point across without thinking that yours is the best.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to go. And I've often said this: if I'm suggesting a new policy, and if I'm the only one around the table that feels this way, I have a responsibility to look inwards and say, okay, what am I missing here? Because no one else is on board. But if I'm suggesting something that everyone's on board, or the majority is, then I'm onto something. And that's where, as a politician, you have to understand where to give credit where credit is due, but also to bow out when you go, I'm really not getting this. So let's regroup, let's rethink, let's consult, let's figure out which are the strong points out of this policy, which ones need to be left out, what's realistic, and then you go from there. But I've learned so far such an amazing amount of information, and it's just been great. The administration's really good at that.
It's that political astuteness that people are probably not always totally aware of unless you've watched something like House of Cards or something of the sorts. But do you feel when you say this idea of if you're the only person coming up with an idea, it's your responsibility to look inwards, it's not always that you're wrong. A single voice looking in the opposition could be a sign of progress and sort of moving back and just joining the general flow kind of thing that could halt things as well. So how do you balance that, like coming on board and agreeing with the other 7 councillors and the mayor as well, whilst not getting stuck in a rut?
That's a good question. It's not always easy. I'll be honest with you. You know, we always have this conversation where you win some and you lose some, right?
Absolutely.
So you're going to do whatever you can. Most of the times, and that's when something that people don't really realize, and I've had comments like this before where they say, well, I don't see you asking a question, but I like to ask my questions before the meetings. I'll call the directors, I'll go through everything. We'll call each other as far as councillors and say, are you reading this the same way I'm reading it? If I'm trying to pitch something, I will call some of the councillors and say, you know, would you add anything? Do you see it the same way I do? Do you think that this is an issue?
Absolutely.
And if you know, I get that good sense of people saying, yeah, absolutely, then I feel like I'm onto something. Right? You're right about progression to a certain extent. I think, but you know, that one voice that's going to speak to a new idea is very green usually, right? So they'll blurt out something that they want done. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for everyone, or that it fits into the budget, or that it fits into our ability to be able to pull this off.
Yeah.
And there's a certain time for specific projects, and there's some projects that would be great, just not right now. Kind of like when people say you're ahead of your time, or that kind of stuff. Policy works the same way. And it's incredibly difficult to try to put policy, because policy is such a fixed way of looking at it, and you're putting it on top of one of the most unpredictable things ever, and that's people.
Absolutely.
So you're trying to fix something concrete on unpredictability.
Yeah, the human condition of ingenuity, but at the same time, complete unpredictability.
Correct. And it's normal. I mean, that's what policy does. And that's why sometimes when you have to look back and say, am I heading in the right direction? Am I not? You know, it's kind of like bylaws. You know, you can make as many bylaws as you want, but do you actually have the manpower to be able to enforce those bylaws?
Absolutely. And
So
you speak of green there as well. I mean, there's a few councillors on the council at the moment. They're in their first term, but you're coming towards the end of the first term now. Have you seen some progression in them in the last 3 years, in the way they handle things and the way they approach certain things in council as well?
yeah, for sure, for sure. We all grow into the job. I think there's not a single person that starts in a job and in 4 years later hasn't learned a few things. I think communication is one of those really important parts of the job. You have to be able to, and like I said before, communicate effectively to the message that you want, because you have to make sure that it's something that is good enough for everybody. And if you can't communicate that, that's an issue. Some councillors, you know, I wasn't a great communicator when I first started. I was guided, you know, our mayor, Guy, is one of those men that likes to, you know, sometimes pull you aside and say, you know, you did good, or you did, you know, you need to.
Bit of a stern professor kind of thing?
Yeah,
or?
but you know what though, his job, any job of a mayor is to be able to guide a team.
Yes.
And to be able to make them grow. And you know, I use him as an example because he's the only mayor that I've you know, had the pleasure of serving under, but he's one of those people that will call you and say, you know, you were either completely off or you were really good, and here's a word of advice on next time you might want to do this. So
Well, we're speaking of the kind of things touching upon. We're going to definitely touch on that a little bit more in the second part of this episode. But just finally, on your own political career, 2022 next year, municipal elections, are you likely to put your name back in the hat again? What are we thinking?
I've started assembling some people for a mayoral run.
Okay.
We'll see how that goes. You know, a year is a long time, and sometimes it's a very short time. It goes by very fast, but it is quite long. So I have started putting the pieces in place, you know, and then working on some policy ideas that would be good to take the city to the next level.
Fantastic. I'm sure we'll be able to catch up and speak about that a little bit more as well. Speaking of policies that are in place, not quite on a municipal level, but unfortunately as we stand here and talk today on what is a lovely warm day, yet still wearing masks next to each other, is the province of Ontario has gone into a third state of emergency. In terms of how you're feeling about the pandemic at the moment on a personal front, I mean, we're 14 months into it. How are you doing?
That's a loaded question, but I'm glad you asked. It's difficult. I think, you know, like I'm like everyone else. I have ups and downs. I have days where I go, this is crazy. I just want to go sit on a patio and, you know, support some local businesses around, and I just can't. But there are other days where I say, you know what, this could be the new normal. So we're going to have to get used to this new way of living. You know, My son just hates the fact that every time, you know, it seems to be getting nice out, he can't play with his friends. He can't, you know, and he's a pretty sporting guy. He likes to play basketball and that sort of thing and road hockey, and he just, you know, can't do it. He just started, and all of a sudden we're like, yeah, lockdown, that's it. I think it's really hard on children. It's really hard on senior citizens, and I feel for them. I've gotten many calls from senior citizens, some of them quite emotional on the phone, and you know, I try to be there for them as much as I can and try to explain that we're doing the best we can. If we could vaccinate much faster, we would, but unfortunately, we don't have the vaccines to put in people's arms.
Supply is the main issue, isn't it?
Supply is the issue. And you know what? When we first started with, you know, we'll say anybody over 80 and then 70 and 65, we're going down. There are fewer people that are above 80 than there are in their 40s or 50s, right? Absolutely. So as we start scaling down, the pool gets wider. Yeah. And so you have to wait till you have those vaccines to be able to make sure that, you know, people that are actually getting booking appointments are able to get their shot, right? So we're making great strides. Look, we have an amazing fire chief who is exceptional at these types of situations. He's, you know, I think we've got some firefighters that are now trained for vaccines. I think that was the main case to try to do, and we're really doing well as far as trying to do as best we can with what we've got. I mean, we're
quite
limited.
The steal grabbing Mr. Voisin from Cornwall as well, wasn't it? He's great to have him here so far. Looking a little bit, and you mentioned your son there and the struggles on that front. One of the big worries coming up over the next week is the fact that we've got the April break, the delayed March break, and one of the worries is that we saw this big spike in young people post-Christmas, and that children, especially with the nice weather, are going to conglomerate in these kind of public spaces, meet up and just spread the virus even further. I know that Ottawa was talking about enforcing things with bylaws. How much chat has there been amongst councillors about some of the precautions and some of the actual strict measures that might need to be taken within the municipality over the course of the next month?
You know, it's interesting because, and I take council's responsibility on policy making very literally. So we've already set, you know, the rules on exactly what is enforceable, what is not. The fire chief and his team, as well as bylaw, know exactly what they need to do on a provincial standard and what the province expects us to do. And so I can't really go into details exactly on how we intend on doing that. I think that they have their marching orders from much higher area than we are. Yeah. And they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that people abide by this. I can guarantee you, Thomas, if people would have just wore their masks the entire time as they were told, this pandemic we would not be on a third lockdown. So it's happening because some people just refuse to understand this. I have people that I know that keeps talking about bubbles. Well, they're in my bubbles, and those people have other bubbles.
Yes.
And then those people have well, if everyone's got a bubble, it's no longer a bubble. I'm not sure if you know what a bubble looks like, but it doesn't have 4 bubbles attached to one bubble.
Well,
so,
sometimes when I blow my bubbles, but no, I completely get your point.
You know what I mean, right? So it is frustrating. I don't necessarily think this is a third wave per se. I think the virus is still in its second wave. I think we are causing the waves by shutting down and reopening. So we're causing these spikes by doing this. Yeah. It's kind of like an accordion type thing. But I understand the provincial government needs to do something to be able to make sure that they balance public safety with not bankrupting
the economy.
The economy. You have to have this. Look, I'm not. I've never really taken sides on political matters provincially or federally, but I can guarantee you there's not a single leader out there that is not losing sleep over this. They are all very distraught about what we need to do on this. This is not an easy thing, and none of these decisions are taken lightly. I don't know the Premier personally, but I'm pretty sure that he's having a very hard time to sleep over this kind of stuff.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. Mario, thank you very much for the insight there a little bit into some of the matters that are going on provincially as well as in your own life. We're going to take a brief pause, and when we come back, we'll take our focus back exactly to our municipality and in particular Mario's ward. So be back in a second. Well, hello and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining us again today, Mario. In this second half of the show, what we're going to do is we're going to dive in a little bit more about the municipal side of things and your own particular ward. So to sort of throw it out there as a continuation of the conversation we're having in the first half about this current lockdown and the difficulties for businesses, your ward does encompass a big bulk of the Clarence-Rockland businesses in the city anyway of our municipality. So have you been, I take it you've been hearing from a lot of them. How are they feeling about this?
They're frustrated. I mean, who wouldn't be in this situation, right? So their entire livelihood, it's not just their business, but their business pays for their livelihood, right? And a lot of them are stressed. A lot of them are frustrated. A lot of them are angry. You know, I think a lot of them are contemplating probably things that they never thought they'd contemplate before. And, you know, are we closing? Are we staying open? I mean, at one point, I mean, the government taps are going to run out, right? So we're not going to be able to keep providing assistance. I say we, but them, the province. So I really don't know. I know, to answer your question, they're frustrated. They're very frustrated. I don't blame them.
And municipally, you said obviously the taps, they come provincially, but municipally, is there anything that you can do for these businesses?
We did it when it first hit. We also have to be careful because this is the last form of government. This is the last layer. And so if we delay payments, then we delay everything. We delay construction, we delay vital works that need to be done, we delay, you know, progression, I guess we can say, so progress. So at the beginning, we said to people, look, if you can't pay your taxes, you know, there's a deferment payment plan, there's different ways of doing certain things. And that was mostly because the province hadn't come out with all of its plans yet. And I think now that they have, it's moved to them. The province also recognizes any municipality's inability to be able to provide substantial funding. Absolutely. It's just not, we're not built for it. We're built to literally just put hands in the ground and sorry, not hands in the ground, feet on the ground, and do what we need to do for the municipality. So financially, we're strapped. We don't have that.
Yeah, just a case of trying to hold on for the next 28 days, really, isn't it? And hopefully at that point, I mean, Dr. Paul was saying in his press conference the other night that by the 7th of May, we'll have about 40–50% of the eligible population of our area vaccinated, which is a great statistic. But again, with the weather warming up and things like that, is there anything being pushed to try and get some more outdoor businesses? I know throughout the whole of Ottawa, for example, they're really pushing to have patios on streets and things like that, closing places off to really try and give these businesses an opportunity to give some outdoor dining experiences. Are you finding any such requests?
We're not, I know they exist. We're not always in the know. I think the departments are the ones handling that. I know Broadway's had one last year, and I believe they're going to have another patio this year. I think, you know, Browerk Hoffman is also working towards that. Nothing's been finalized yet. So I'm trying to be there to support them. I got a call from them as well to say, you know, how can we go about this? And I did my best to line them up. And that's what I have to do is just, okay, here's where you need to go. Here's who you need to talk to get that done. And so we're doing our best as councillors to make sure that we're doing our best for them. But you're right, this ward actually most likely has most of the businesses. It also encompasses the highway. It has the entire north side of Laurier from one side to the other. So I think, I remember on my first couple of terms, I was trying to send out Christmas cards to every business, and it became a very daunting task because a lot of businesses, you know, cards were coming back and wrong address and different things like that. But yeah, I was up to over 200 for sure.
Yeah, I remember during the earlier days in the pandemic, you were really trying to do a social media post to try and encourage all the businesses in your ward, and it just became impossible to satisfy everyone.
It became impossible because the first thing I posted, their competitors like, what about me? And I'm like, well, I'm not there yet, but I will. And then they're like, well, there's preferential treatment. I'm like, there isn't. It's the first day. I'm just trying to get there. And so, you know, again, we have a lot of ideas as councillors to try to help our communities, but sometimes things get in the way and it falls flat.
And as you say, unfortunately, the last 12 to 14 months have led to a shorter fuse on people's parts and an element of exasperation and tiredness.
You're absolutely correct. But what's important to keep in mind here is that, you know, most of the businesses are on social media. And what I do now is instead of personally promoting certain people or certain businesses that I feel are in a desperate state and need that promotion, what I do is I just make sure that I try to share as many of their posts as possible. And that way, it's no preferential treatment. As I see them pop up on my Facebook feed, I'll repost and do all that. So.
Yeah, and I know there's obviously another buy local campaign that's coming up. I'm actually going to speak to Councillor Cardarelli about that. You mentioned, just a few minutes ago about the highway, and that's something that's been come up in conversation. It was in the Committee of the Whole a few weeks ago, and again in the regular meeting this week as it was searching for approval. You brought forward a certain topic about pedestrian crossings. Can you give us a brief explanation as to what the issue seems to be and why you decided it was important enough that you needed to bring it forward?
Well, first of all, we've got a highway that goes through our town, and most of the highways that go through town are slowed down a little bit more than 70. So the counties own the highway. It is their responsibility. Anytime that we want something done on the highway, the counties have to approve it. And so it's very frustrating for us because we see a clear issue, we see a clear problem, and literally our hands are tied. Like we just can't do anything. So what we did is I spoke to a couple of councillors and said, I'm going to push this through. I'd love your support on it. And it was essentially to have advanced pedestrian crossings. And these work in Ottawa, they work in bigger cities as well. And it's just basically when they press the button, all the street lights stay red except for the pedestrian crossing. And what that does is it allows the pedestrian to enter the intersection and be a lot more visible before their lights turn green, right? And so right now you have a lot of people sometimes that they don't even know the light's gone, their pedestrian crossing has come up. They start crossing, but they've started crossing probably delayed, and then a car is coming and that sort of thing. They are dangerous intersections. There's a lot of businesses on this specific corner for Edwards, for example, who has a Tim Hortons, a gas station, an ice cream place, a chip truck, and a garden, not a garden, but a vegetable market. And so that's a lot of cars coming in already a small intersection, right? Edwards was not built, I think, for that, but the counties have agreed to have these businesses operate there. And so, we have a lot of work to do on that front. The highway is dangerous. Just from between Edwards and Chamberlain, there's no sidewalks anywhere. Yeah. And I remember driving down and seeing this lady who was pushing a baby buggy with 2 grocery bags hanging on there in the gravel on the side of a highway. And that upsets me because I think if the counties or the city, it's not just, I don't want to seem like it's just the counties, but if all parties are going to say, yes, we should have businesses on the highway, then you have to make it safe for pedestrians to get there.
There's a level of expectation that if you build it, they will come, as the phrase goes. And if they're going to come, you've got to make it safe.
Correct. The highway was built to bypass the town. And when the town decided to build on the highway, well, then you have to make accessible. You don't have a choice. I think that's a responsibility for any city. And so it frustrates me. As you can see, I'm getting a little agitated, but it's upsetting because at any moment, someone could get seriously hurt. And then they're going to say, okay, now we're going to build it. Well, let's be proactive. Don't wait until someone gets hurt. You know that if people, not everybody has cars. There's, we'll go into affordable housing later, and that's a perfect example. Not everybody can drive to the grocery store. So if the grocery store is in a place where it's dangerous to get to, then make it safe.
And you touch on it there, and you literally just mentioned about affordable housing, and we talk about dealing with it before the problem arises. Unfortunately, the issue with affordable housing has been something that has existed for a while, not just in our municipality. Of course, it's existed across a lot of places, but it's definitely been amplified by the pandemic. So there was a recent push for a affordable housing set in Clarence Creek, which got rejected in council, but it feels like the same project was just brought back. So why is this being brought back if council rejected it last time?
I think council rejected it, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, so I'll speak for myself. I was under the impression when it was first brought up, and I think it was at late 2019, December 2019, if I'm not mistaken, is that it seemed to have more of a push on a new fire hall, and we could also build affordable housing. That's how I took it, and it could be completely wrong. I know maybe perhaps the intent was to have just a bigger conversation. you know, council rejected it. I certainly wasn't the only one. It didn't pass. Now that we're actually in a situation, and you know, first of all, the need for affordable housing has always existed, but now when home prices are becoming most likely a luxury, like you just, not everybody can afford these anymore, right?
Rent prices are barely affordable.
Rent prices are insane, and everything is like that too. So what we're trying to do now is, I've had a conversation with Chief Voisin, and said maybe we bring this back, but we bring this back with more of a focus on affordable housing, less on a focus on the fire hall, even though they'll be combined. And the reason why this is good is because when you build affordable housing, you have to find land that you can actually get for cheap. This land we already own.
Mm-hmm.
So right off the bat, we're eliminating a big portion of the funds that would actually have to be attributed to that project. So if we own the land, then let's do something with it. And I think it's a great idea. I think the recent fact that home prices are now probably 30% above value, I guess, and in different places, which I think is ridiculous. You have people now going out on the street. There was a single father on Facebook with children looking for a place to live because he had just been kicked out of his basement apartment because the people who owned the house wanted to sell it to make a profit, and they're completely allowed to do that. It's their home. But now we have an issue.
And if that's what the market is at the moment, there's always going to be people taking advantage of it. But I'm sure there are plenty of listeners out there that are going to be relieved to hear that affordable housing is high up on the priority list for this council. I mean, this project itself, if it goes through, is a few homes, but there are, as we know, plenty of people on that list waiting for affordable housing. So it's definitely not a topic we've spoken of the last time here, for sure.
Our goal is to be shovel ready, and so we have to go through everything. Obviously, affordable housing is a Prescott-Russell United Counties issue. What we need to do is make sure that all of our steps are taken, that the United Counties are ready to go, that everything is ready to roll, that the second that a grant or a contribution comes available at the provincial or the federal government, that we're able to pounce on that and right away start building. And that's what our goal is. If we can have a fire station in there as well, obviously the security of people is paramount as well.
Yeah.
And most people complain about fire stations until they need them. And they complain about police officers until you need them. And so when a fire hall was built in the 1950s or 60s and can no longer fit the trucks that are today, we have an issue.
Absolutely. It's like insurance. You pay for it and you hope you'll never want to use it.
Exactly. Yeah, it is an insurance, for sure.
Well, Mario, thank you so much for taking your time. It always feels like it flies by when we sit down to have a chat.
Seriously.
It's already over.
Has it already been a half hour?
Indeed it has. So I thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for tuning in to episode number 9 of In Your Ward. We'll be carrying on, as I said at the start of this episode, to go through and speak to all of the councillors. So please, if you have any questions for your councillor, get in touch with us and we'll make sure it's asked. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.